Welcome to Sober on Purpose, the show where emotional sobriety and the messy reality of loving someone with addiction meet. We're here to help you discover peace, purpose, and healing through Jesus, no matter how chaotic life feels.
Welcome to Sober on Purpose, where we serve Christian women who are supporting their husbands dealing with addiction. We get down into the nitty-gritty of what's going on and how you can truly love and support them. And today I have the marvelous Mark Hicks. We're going to learn more about what he does and how he sets people up to win in this very complicated process. So Mark, tell us a little bit more about you and how you started doing this kind of work.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I am Mark. I am a author, a ghostwriter, a counselor, a minister, and a relationship specialist. And the reason I kind of gave myself that specialist title is I wrote the book, Learning Love, Building a Life That Matters, and Healthy Relationships That Last. That was originally self-published, but I'm very glad to say it's been picked up now by Morgan James Publishing and will
Woohoo!
be out next year. I'm very excited about that. So in June of next year, my upcoming book, Learning Love, will be available wherever books are sold. But I came to uh, talk about love and relationships, particularly when they are in a difficult situation, when we are difficult circumstances, because so many people are in those kind of circumstances. There's so many people that come from dysfunctional families and have addiction issues and have toxic issues within them. And what I want people to know is that love is a learned skill set. And even if you did not learn it growing up because you were in a dysfunctional family, or even if you're not experiencing it now because you just don't know what to do and
Mm.
are struggling in relationships, there is a learned skill set to love. In my book, I teach the five components of love. And anyone can learn these five components, and they are based out of the wisdom of Scripture, specifically out of the wisdom literature of the Old Testament. As I read
Fantastic.
those,
I'm going to slow you down just a little
okay,
bit.
very good.
Tell us the books that are the wisdom literature.
Yep.
What are we looking at?
We're looking at Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. They are known as the wisdom literature of the Old Testament. And as I read those, now there's no place in there you're going to look at those books and it says, here's the five components of love. But as I read those books, their themes began to emerge from each one.
Mm.
And it's called the wisdom literature, but I'm going to say that our greatest wisdom is love. If we understand
Mm.
love, we understand wisdom, we understand life, we understand relationships, we understand ourselves, and we understand God because God is love. And
Yeah.
so, as I began to see themes emerge from these books, the five components of love began to emerge. And that's what I write about in my book. And that's why I say I didn't make this up. It's been around for thousands of years. And it can work for anyone, regardless of your situation, because it is out of that wisdom of Scripture that teaches us how to have wisdom. And the greatest of that wisdom is how to love even in this very difficult world.
So let's bring it down into the practical. I'm a wife. I'm trying to love somebody who maybe is even in recovery, but there's still a lot of habits and behaviors to where
Oh, yeah.
I'm grinding my teeth at night.
Right.
And I think I'm doing loving things. Can you give us scenarios where you've worked with folks or talked about it in your book where they think they're doing loving things, but it actually isn't loving? It's
Yeah.
out of the character of God.
Yeah, there's so many things that when we're in those difficult situations, it is so difficult to kind of sort through what's the right thing to do in these situations. And one of the things that I say first and foremost is everyone needs help. This is
Mm.
a team sport. Don't try
I
to
love it.
Do
Yeah.
not try to do this alone. Life and love and family and relationships are a team sport. Don't take this on by yourself. Get a therapist, a counselor, a coach, get into a group, get into recovery groups, get into something. more than
Hmm.
one thing. Get into a place where you're getting help
Hmm.
because we need to be able to run things by people. Is this helping or is this hurting? Is this supporting or is this enabling? Those are not cut and dried answers. There's
Hmm.
there's no way to say definitively exactly what is supportive and what is enabling in every situation. We need to know the specifics. And you
Hmm.
need to find people around you, particularly professionals, that understand what you're going through, that you can tell them the details and feel safe telling them the details. And that's not true of everybody. You can't just go to every friend or family member and share everything. We
Hmm.
would like to think we could, but unfortunately, we just can't. And get the help you need to make sure you're helping and not hurting. One of the other things I'll say there is the first component of love, out of the five that I teach, the first component of love is grief.
I love it that you said that. I have really been on a journey looking at grief. How do you describe grief? What does it look like when a person comes to you, but they're not even sure how to use that word?
Yeah, grief is ultimately a healer, but it hurts in the process. It's not fun. It is painful, and we have to accept that it's going to be painful. But we accept that pain not as a martyr, but as an understanding that this is going to help. That
Mm,
grief is a process. And again, getting help with that grief, getting professional help with that grief from a coach or a counselor, a therapist, someone a grief group, someone that can help us in this process of grief. Ultimately, it is a healer. And people,
mm.
when they think about love and relationships, they think, well, we're supposed to make this all about bubblegum and butterflies. Everything's supposed to be sweet and beautiful. Well, it is at times. We can get to that, and that is part of it. That is one of the components, actually. I'll talk about that later. But the first component that we really need to understand is that element of grief, because no one gets through this life without scars.
Mm,
Everyone's going to get hurt along the way. And sometimes, even though we are still in the game, we're still there in that relationship, we're still working to make it work, we're instinctively putting up barriers, guarding our heart, putting up walls, keeping people at arm's length. And because we're still physically there, we think that we're still in that relationship, and yet we may be barricading ourselves behind emotional walls to protect ourselves. And really, what we're doing there is building our own prison, that we are isolating ourselves even within the relationship. And that just can't work. And so understand that grief is a healer, that we do get hurt along the way,
mm.
and yes, some things are so painful in life that it's like it leaves a hole in our heart. But
So,
you can live a really good life with a hole in your heart. And that's what I want people to understand. You can live a really good life with a hole in your heart.
so what am I exactly? Am I grieving that the dream didn't go the way that I had it in my fantasy? Am I grieving that I'm not as mature as I thought I was? I'm barricading because I don't know how to handle it. What am I grieving when you say grief?
It can be all of the above. It can be so many things, but I think what you just hit on is very important. When things are not what you wanted them to be in a relationship, you have lost the dream. And
Mm,
even though the relationship still be there, it can still feel like a death of that
mm,
relationship.
mm-hmm,
Even if the relationship's still there, even if you have some hope that it can be fixed, that it can be a new day, we hope for that. But it can still feel in that moment as if the relationship has died and you have lost that dream, and that is extremely painful. And another reason why I say everyone should be in some type of coaching or counseling or support group is because some people won't get that. Your friends and
mm,
family, when you're grieving the loss of a relationship you're still in, a
mm-hmm,
lot of people aren't going to get it.
mm-hmm.
You aren't going to get the support that you need. They're going to say, well, at least that person's still there. At least they haven't left you. At least they're not dead. What about
At
so and
least they
so?
show up at church,
At least they're here at
You've
church.
got a husband that
And
shows up at church, those types of things. Yeah.
exactly. And at least you're not like so and so, their husband died, or
Hmm.
this person, their husband left them or cheated on them. At least you're not like that. And sometimes we feel guilty then for having the emotions we feel because somebody else might have it worse, quote unquote. There's no
Mm-hmm.
ranking. It's not worse. It's not better. This is not a scoreboard. It's just hurts.
Yes.
And sometimes we need to understand that yes, we have that hole in our heart, but you can live a good life with a hole in your heart. You can
All right,
still
talk
have
to
a
us
good
about
life.
that. You have
You
a
can have a
hole in your heart
yeah,
and you can still live in the good life.
you can still have love, you can still have life, you can still have connections, you can still have the life you want, but it will take some time and it will take grief and it will take some help, a lot of help sometimes. But we need to understand that hole in the heart's going to be there. Sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
think we can't go on until that's fixed, and some things
Mm-hmm.
can't be fixed. Some things are always going to hurt,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a healing that takes place through that grief that we can still have connections, we can still have life, we can still have love, we can still have healthy, happy relationships, even though we've been hurt and that hurt can't be fixed. The pain of the past does not necessarily equal the future. We can have a good life with a hole in our heart. The way I kind of explain that, imagine somebody lost an arm in an industrial accident.
Mm-hmm.
Life's not going to be the same. That arm's
No.
not growing back, but we see lots of people that have a great life despite an accident like that. But they have to learn new skills. They have to go through a process. They need help. They have to maybe use a prosthesis. They certainly need doctors. They might need physical therapy. It's a process to it, but there is a healing that takes place, not to grow the arm back, but a healing to get to a place we learn new skills to live a different life. And so we can live a really good life without that arm. Same is true for our emotional state. You can live a really good life even though you've got those emotional scars, but you have to go through the grief process and learn how to live that new type of life.
Wow. I love it. You start with grief. Okay, so we've done the grief. Now what?
The second component is emotion. This is the one everyone thinks about. This is the sweet part. This is what they build rom-com movies on, is the emotional connection. But that can be difficult, particularly if we have been hurt. And difficult for some people just in their personality. Some people are very emotional. They connect emotionally very easily. They wear their emotions on their sleeve, and it just comes natural for them. For those
Mm-hmm.
folks, I don't really have to teach anything. But for some folks, it's difficult, especially if you have come from a dysfunctional family, if your parents, were not people to say things like "I love you" and things like that, and didn't really show you love as a child. There's lots of scenarios that can make us hesitant to have emotional connections. And for those folks, I say it's a learned skill. Just go
Mm-hmm.
slow. Like
Mm-hmm.
any other skill set, we can learn it. The
Mm-hmm.
important thing is if you care about someone in your life, let them know you care.
Mm-hmm.
And so learn to say, I love you. And if you can't say that because maybe love was used as a weapon against you at some point in your life, then don't say it. Say things like, I appreciate you. Or just say a sincere thank you when someone does something nice. Little gestures can go a long way. And
Mm-hmm.
so start small and work your way into a place that you can show the people that you care about them. It doesn't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to be anything outlandish, but just letting people know you care. Don't assume it. Don't assume that they know just because you're married to them, or don't assume they know just because you're kin to someone. Let them know it on a regular basis that you notice them, that you appreciate them, that you love and care for them. That creates an emotional bond that's extremely important in relationships. And like I say, for some people, it comes easy. For other people, it can be very difficult. And if you've been through some tough times in a relationship, if your marriage has fallen on difficult times, it's hard to show that emotion. So start small. Just do little
How do
things.
you deal with performance love? If you love me, you would. If you perform this way, then I will love you.
Yeah.
Which that is not what the Father says to us.
That is not at all. None of that is true at all. And that's manipulative. That's manipulative behavior. And that really goes under the third component of love, which is practicality.
Mm,
Practicality is that decision-making element. It's the element of living together well.
mm.
You might have heard someone say, "I love them, but I can't live with them."
Or I don't like them, but I love them.
Yeah. Those are the people that have done well, or maybe not well, but have done at least all right with the second component, which is emotion, but they
Hmm.
failed at the third component, which is practicality. Practicality is that decision making element of relationships where we live together well. And if you're getting manipulated, if there's gaslighting, if there's all these things, you're not living together well. There's manipulation there, and that calls for boundaries. That's a
Mm.
decision to be made. And again, do that with some help. Get into therapy, get a counselor, get someone that can help you understand what boundaries are in that situation specifically and how to set those boundaries because that's just manipulative, abusive kind of behavior. And practicality goes beyond that. It goes into how we deal with money as a married couple. How do we deal with parenting? How do we deal with household chores? All of these just normal things of life uh,
Hmm.
of learning to set boundaries, learning how to compromise, learning how to stand up for yourself, but also care about the person you're with. All these negotiations that have to take place within a relationship that can feel pretty natural if things are going great, but be extraordinarily difficult if you're in a tough relationship. And so practicality balances that emotion. What they're doing there when they say those kind of manipulative statements is they're trying to play on that second component, on that emotional connection.
Hmm.
If you felt love for me, you would do this. But that is violating that third component. It's just not practical. It is not practical to let yourself be manipulated in a relationship and expect that relationship to be healthy.
You said one of my favorite words is boundaries.
Yeah.
And often when I say this out loud, people are like, well, I set boundaries, but they don't follow them. And I have to re-explain what boundaries are. How are you describing boundaries in this book?
Yeah, boundaries, it is a, and again, this is gets to be a gray area sometimes in how we nuance specific situations. But in general, boundaries say, I'm going to live here this way, in this healthy place.
Hmm.
And I would love for you to live here in this healthy place with me.
Amen. Which
And
is what
if
God says,
that's
right?
what God
God says,
says,
I'm going to live in this healthy place.
yep.
Come join me.
And if you choose not to do that, I'm not kicking you out. You're choosing not to be here. This is your choice to not be in this relationship with me in this healthy place. And so you're not punishing someone, you're not kicking them out of your life, you're not abandoning them. You are living this healthy life and making it very clear this is how we live. And
Mm.
if you choose not to, you have every right to choose not to. This is it's your life. I can't force you. I'm not going to try to force you. I would love to have you living with me in this healthy life. But if you choose not to, then you are choosing not to be in a relationship with me. Now,
Hmm.
that's very hard. And if that person chooses not to be in a relationship with you, that's going to hurt. And that
Hmm.
takes us back to grief.
We're back in the circle
That's
again.
why these are all interconnected. They're not stair steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to go to a high place. They are interconnected because if we end up saying these very practical boundaries and someone chooses not to, it will hurt. You have lost the dream at that point. It might even be a relief that they left, but it's a pain that you lost that dream, and that will be going back to grief. The other thing that comes into play here with boundaries is the fourth component of love, which is loving ourselves. It is acceptance.
Amen. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's what I talk
Exactly.
about all the time. You
And the
have to
thing
love
is,
yourself.
and why would Jesus say it that way? Love your neighbor as yourself. People have gotten very confused about this because it almost, if we don't understand the concept of acceptance and compassion of ourselves and loving ourselves, then it looks like Jesus is lowballing it. If we had the capacity to love somebody more than ourselves, why would Jesus say, well, you could love your neighbor more than yourself, but why bother? Just love them at the level you love yourself. Jesus is saying
That's good.
you only have the capacity to love somebody as much as you love yourself. And interestingly, that's now been proven in psychological science. Brene Brown has written brilliantly on this from her
Oh, isn't that
research.
good? Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliantly. Other people have written about it as well through other research. She's the most noted and just a marvelous writer in this area, in a lot of areas. But she has shown in her research, psychological science, we don't have the capacity to love more than we love ourselves. It's not possible.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you want to
Yes.
love other people more, learn to love yourself. And the reason for that, love is not a commodity like money. If we want more money, we could get a second job. We could take out a loan from a bank. We may be able to borrow money from a friend or family member. Theoretically, there's a lot of different ways we could acquire money.
Mm.
Love is not like that. It's organic. It's something that has grown within us. And from the faith perspective, we know it has grown because God is love and God, we are created in the image of God. And so it is grown within us, and we can only give away to the capacity that we have grown it within us. And that means we can't love more than we love ourselves. Now, when we get into these dysfunctional relationships, then we have it backwards. We're trying to get someone to love us, jump through the right hoops to make them love us so that we are validated so we can love ourselves. That's not what Jesus said. That's not what Jesus taught, and that's also not what science and psychology teaches. We don't have the capacity to do that. It sounds logical to say, well, if they love me, I'd love myself more. It doesn't actually work that way. In reality, we only can love other people more than we can only love other people to the extent we love ourselves. We cannot love other people more than we love ourselves, which is why Jesus said it that way. He knew what Brene Brown would be writing about 2,000 years later in her research. Jesus is brilliant. And he said, love your neighbor as yourself because he already knew you can't do any more than that. What he's really saying is love your neighbor as much as you can. And that's to the extent we love ourselves.
That you love yourself. We are in, we're almost in a culture of self-loathing.
Yeah.
And we want to kind of say, well, they didn't understand, Facebook and selfies and all this.
Yeah.
We're in the culture of self-loathing. If you're a woman who, if you're talking to a woman who just had this aha moment of, I really am trying to get my needs met from my husband, trying to get my needs met from my children, to validate myself, what would you say that she could start doing? Where could she go to start filling her cup practically?
Yeah. I think one of the things we really have to do is understand our own self-worth. And the way I describe this is imagine I have in my hand a diamond, which is the size of a baseball.
Ooh,
And
really
it
good.
is perfectly cut, perfectly clear, baseball sized diamond. So how much is that worth? Obviously, it's priceless. So let's now take that priceless diamond out into a rural area, into the cow pasture, and roll it around in the muck and the mire and the cow manure, and bring that diamond back in. How much is it worth now? It's still priceless if you know what it is.
Right, right.
We have to know who we are. Yes, we have a lot of stuff because we've made mistakes and people have done terrible things to us and life just hurts. There's a lot of things that happen. But that is the stuff of life. That's the muck and the mire and cow manure we get rolled around in this fallen world. Who we are is the exquisite creation of God in the image of love. And that doesn't change. And so the idea of faith, the idea of counseling, the idea of self-improvement, self-development is always to come to understand who we are as that exquisite creation, that exquisite diamond. And all that stuff we see that we criticize about ourselves, well, yeah, it's there, but that's part of redemption. That's part of self-improvement. That's part of counseling, of cleaning that stuff up, of dealing with those mistakes and dealing with those misconceptions and dealing with the stuff people have done to us and cleaning that up so we can more and more see that exquisite diamond that we were actually created to be. Being in a fallen world and messing up things up and having things messed up around us doesn't change who we were created to be. When we start to see that, we start to understand that and live into that, even if it doesn't feel right at first, get used to it. Reinforce that. Because the
Get
thing is,
uncomfortable being comfortable with the fact that I mean,
yeah,
doesn't it seem backwards that we need to learn to be comfortable with the fact that we're valued, that we are worthy?
yeah, it's really odd how we've come to this place, but it's very common. And so because it's so common, we think it's right. It's not. We are people of value. We are creations that are exquisite. And all the stuff that has happened to us, whether it's our fault or not, is just the stuff that's happened. And that can be cleaned up. That can be redeemed. That can be cleaned in our life so that we understand who we actually are. And then it becomes very easy to love ourselves. It's not selfish in any way. It's not boastful because we are then able to love people more. The more we love ourselves, we're able to love people more the right way.
So the wife, the mom who is struggling with either an addiction in the past, or is this going to happen again, or the shoe falling off, when she this is how I phrase it, when she turns her eyes to Jesus, when she looks at what her value is with Jesus,
Mhm.
she's going to be much more compassionate for the person who is in her life rather than condemning, because none of us are
Yeah.
condemned anymore. We can be convicted, but we
Right.
can't be condemned. So I
Exactly right.
love
Yeah.
the muck and the mire, because if you continue to rub that all over yourself, right,
Yeah.
you're going to stink.
Yeah. We look at that and we see it, and we look at that on other people and we see it, and we think that's who we are. And that is a misconception. That's what the fallen world makes us look like, but it's not who we are. And if we understand our own inherent created value, it's easier then to clean that stuff up. When we think it just rotten to the core, then why bother? But when we understand that's surface stuff, we can clean that off. That's
Mm-hmm.
what redemption is about. That's what grace is about. And we begin to clean that stuff up and see who we truly are. It's much easier to love ourselves. It's much easier to love others in the way Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And it's easier to set those boundaries because we're
Mm.
worth it. We
Right.
understand our value, and we were never created to be abused. We were never created for someone to manipulate us and use us and abuse us. That was not the reason God created us. That's not the purpose of our exquisite nature. And when we begin to understand that, it becomes easier to set those boundaries, not in a harsh, vindictive way, but in a way that says, I want you to live the same healthy life that I'm going to live.
Well, let me ask you this. Now we've got Galatians 5:22 about long suffering.
Hmm.
And there are some folks who will come to me and say, aren't I supposed to be long suffering? Aren't I supposed to deal with this, whatever this is? How do you look at that? How do you begin to say yes and
Yeah.
no?
Yeah. We have to define what the suffering is. We're going to suffer in a fallen world. And that grief that I talked about earlier, where you have that hole in your heart, that's the
Mm,
suffering. And it's
mm,
going to be there forever. But you can
mhm,
still live that good life with that hole in your heart. However, it was not in the sense of allowing yourself to continually be abused, manipulated, and mistreated. That's not
mhm,
what that verse is for. We are not called to be abused. That's not why we were created. There is suffering in the sense of loss and hardship, and there is suffering in the sense of still having a sense of love for that person, but that does not mean that we have to have a relationship with that person.
mm,
That's
mhm,
really up to them if we are setting those boundaries. Again, they get to choose to live outside our boundaries. That's
mhm,
their choice. That doesn't mean we're kicking them out. And so that long suffering is I'm willing to work with you as long as you're within these healthy boundaries. That may be a struggle, but we can work through that. But when you are choosing to live outside those healthy boundaries, a simple example, an example is you're just not allowed to hit people in the face. You just can't do it.
mm,
You just don't get to
mm,
hit people, period. You don't get to. That's outside of a boundary. Now, does that mean that, well, somebody hit me in the face, I need to be long suffering, so I need to turn the other cheek and let them hit me again? No,
mm,
it means there's a boundary there. They are choosing to live a life that responds in violence, and that's not where we live. We don't live in that world. And so that might be difficult for them to go through that struggle of learning to deal with our anger, of learning to not deal with things in violence. They may need to really go through a lot of stuff to get to a place they can live within that healthy boundary. And we're going to need to walk with them through that.
mm,
That is the
mm.
long suffering. But long suffering is not defined as let them continue to hit you in the face.
Well, and you're not doing them any favors by
No,
letting them do behavior that is actually causing them harm.
exactly. Exactly. The best thing that can happen to an abuser is to run out of people to abuse. And so many times we in the name of compassion, we allow ourselves to continually be abused. And I'm going to argue that's not really compassion, that's struggle with who we are and understanding our own value,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding the practicality nature of love. But we think that if we allow ourselves to continually be abused, that we're that we are somehow, supporting them, and that's just not true. When we when we set those healthy boundaries, we are encouraging them to be the best version of themselves, to get the help they need as well. And yeah, if they are going to be abusive, the best thing that can happen to an abuser is to run out of people to abuse because it's not healthy for them. It's not a healthy life to be an abuser. Obviously, it's not healthy life to be abused, but it's not a healthy life to be an abuser. That's not good for them.
Everybody's hurting. Everybody's
Yeah.
hurting at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
How do we walk into the fifth step?
The fifth one is passion, and this is a passion for life. We need to remember to enjoy life, even though it's hard. We need to remember to have as much fun as possible. Every day's not going to be fun, but some of them can be. And
Some
so
can be
many
really
times
fun.
it can be fun. And we forget that sometimes because we say, well, life is serious. Yes, that's why practicality is the third component of love. We need to make good, serious, healthy decisions. And yes, there are tragedies. That's why grief is the first component of love. We don't forget that. But let's not forget to have fun, to have
Mm.
passion. This becomes the wind in our sails, the fuel in our engine. When we can laugh together, as a family, with our coworkers, with friends, as a church, when we can laugh together, it pulls us together. We enjoy life more. Sometimes we get into the grind, even if we're doing okay in a relationship, we get into the grind of, making that household work and going to work every day and paying the bills and taking care of the kids and doing the homework and all the stuff. And we are doing really well maybe at all that. And then we think, why? Why am I
Yes.
doing this? Well, it was meant to be fun. It was meant to be enjoyable. Every day is not going to be great, but look for it. And that takes a little bit of work because our brains are kind of wired up to protect us.
Mm.
And so it looks for the bad stuff naturally. It looks for the
Hmm.
things that might be harmful, the things that might be insulting to us, physically dangerous, emotionally hurtful. It looks for those things. Naturally, our attention is going to go to that because our brains are wired up to protect us. It's not wired up to see the good stuff
Mm.
because that's not going to hurt us. So there's no danger there. And so we have to train our brains to see it. We have to, especially if we've been through some tough times, some difficulties, some struggles. We've spent a lot of years looking out for the danger, looking out for the hard
Mhm.
times. How do we protect ourselves? We need to learn how to have fun again, to have some passion in life, to enjoy the day as much as possible. Maybe that's just a little bit some days, maybe it's a lot other days, but having a passion for life, enjoying every moment you can, that's not frivolous, it's not silly, it's actually very healthy for our relationships, for our physical health, our mental and emotional health. Fun and laughter and the passion that we have for life, the enjoyment of life is actually really a healthy thing. And so, if we can grieve the hurts of life and have a comeback story from the hard times, if we can connect emotionally on a healthy level, we make good, solid, practical decisions to live together well. We love ourselves first and foremost so that we can love other people. As Jesus said, love them as you love yourself. So we love ourselves more so we can love others more. And we enjoy life. We have a passion for life and we enjoy it with the people we live with. You can build a relationship that is healthy, happy, and thriving in every area of life, whether that's home, work, church, neighborhood, wherever it is. You can build those healthy relationships.
That's somebody you'd want to be around, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a healthy way of life. The subtitle of my book is Building a Life That Matters and Healthy Relationships That Last. That comes from a professor of mine who I had when I was working on my master's in counseling. He said, everybody's problems are unique, but everyone's looking for the same thing. They want a life that matters and healthy relationships that last. And that's not two separate things. That's two sides of the same road. If you
Mm.
have one,
Hmm.
you have the other. When you
Hmm.
have a life that matters, and that comes from, understanding our value, who we are, what we're called to be in this world, and how we're created, and to live that out in relationships, loving God, loving ourselves, and then loving our neighbor, the people in our life as ourselves. As much as we love ourselves, we share that love with others. Then we are living that healthy, happy, thriving life that everyone's looking for.
Mark, you've given us so much to think about. Where can people find you? The book is coming out in January, so
Coming in
give
June.
us the dot.
In June.
In June. Oh,
June?
I had
Yep,
you
June.
6 months in advance. In June. Give us the .coms, the socials. Where can we connect with you to
Yes.
find out more?
Yes, go to my website. It's markahicks.com. Make sure you get my middle initial in there, markahicks.com. And you can find details about my upcoming book. Pre-sales, the pre-orders will be available soon. The book will be available wherever books are sold in June, but the pre-orders will start soon. And in the meantime, you can download my free ebook from my website, The Five Components of Love. It's an overview, just as I've given today. It'll an overview of the five components, much more detail about that in my upcoming book that is coming out. It was previously self-published, but as I said, it's coming out from Morgan James Publishing now, so I'm very excited about that. That's coming up in June. And also, I'm available for speaking engagements, workshops, any coaching, so you can get in touch with me through the contact form. Also, you can find links to my podcast, to my YouTube channel, basically everything in my life you can find there at markahicks.com, or just contact me through the website and let me know you saw me on the show today and just say hi. I'd love to hear from your audience.
Awesome. Again, this is Tanya with Sober on Purpose, and we really want you to take the time to do the self-love that will get you to the next phase. And Mark has some wonderful resources. Be sure to hop over to markahicks.com and let him know you've heard this on Sober on Purpose. So, Mark, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You, beloved listener, are creative, resourceful, and whole. Do you want to add more purpose to your sober journey? Do you want to make room for the new and make your dreams a reality? Apply today for a dream session. Go to tanyagioia.com. That's TANYAGIOIA.com and apply today. Let's get you dreaming about your new purpose.